Yeah. So it's not a workshop, but there's going to be some kind of elements of workshop in it, in the sense that I'm going to probably be not so much teaching, but I want you to learn, right? So it's really about you discovering whether this information is or isn't relevant, or isn't useful. I'm not going to put down any definitive laws. We're just going to explore this concept of the pelvis, because I think it's interesting. I've been looking at it myself and revising it a bit recently. And, you know, our practices goes beyond just the mechanics of our postures. We know that, but that as yoga practitioners, that is inevitably an element that's the basis of what we work with. So it's good to sometimes explore these things that get implemented, and they seem to stay there in our practice. So one of the key instructions that we use in yoga, especially in certain standing poses, is tuck under the pelvis. Okay, so that's a fairly common instruction. It's been used since day dot. The thing is though, when you look at it, it doesn't seem to kind of promise what it offers, or it doesn't offer what it promises. Putting it that way around is a bit better. So it seems to be that the instruction contradicts certain dynamics within the body, right? Certain what we've tried to talk about in Bodhiyoga over the years is, in a way, trust the ergonomics of the posture, the organic movements of the posture in your own body. So yoga is really about getting to know your own system, in terms of alignment, in terms of how you work in the pose, in terms of how you best activate energy, because that's what yoga practice is really about, isn't it? It's about optimizing and maintaining and developing energy. That's a way of looking at yoga. So the way we use the poses augments that or not. And some of these methods don't always offer what they're supposed to offer. So I've been looking at the whole thing of tucking the pelvis under and thinking, well, hang on a minute, there's something here doesn't quite seem right. So there's different ways of looking at it. And I'm not going to have a load of time to go into all the theory, because we could easily spend a morning just exploring this one area. So what I'll do is I'll just make some broad brushstroke remarks as we go through the practice, and then we can sort of go back and try that out in our practice today, okay? And maybe another occasion we could go into it in more detail, but there's not really time in this class. So just to mention a couple of things that we can start to think about, and in a moment we'll go in and start doing some practice. One is that when you're standing in a pose like Tadasana, as soon as you start to do this action of tucking the pelvis under, you'll notice immediate effects in the body. So you should be able to pretty much tell for yourself what's going on. You shouldn't need me to say, well, that'll happen and this will happen and the other thing will happen. So we're going to just become aware of what happens when we move the pelvis through anteversion, retroversion, in terms of the connection between the legs and the spine and the chest, because these are the areas that are mainly affected. And so in some ways, tucking the pelvis under makes sense in certain poses, but not in others. Even though the instruction is typically given in certain poses, it doesn't quite make sense in terms of the effect it has on the rest of the body. So I think it's worth us just looking at that and seeing, well, how does that play out in my own practice? And is that useful or not? Okay. So I'm not here to kind of lay down the law. I'm here to just explore this a little bit with you. So one thing I've noticed is that tucking the pelvis under, it somehow interferes with the entire spine. It interferes with the spine and therefore it interferes with the chest. So it doesn't allow opening to happen when you tuck the pelvis under. So anything that involves a back bend would seem to be contradicted if you were to give the instruction, then tuck your pelvis under. Yeah, because you're trying to do two opposing things actually. In certain poses in standing, you actually want this openness. And you want the curvature of the spine to be there. The curve is a double S. It's not a straight thing. And it never will be. It never will be, because the spine structure is designed in such a way to absorb impact and compression. So when we give the instruction axial lengthening, that's really just an invitation to lengthen the trunk. It's not about straightening the spine, okay? So often tucking the pelvis under implicitly means straighten the spine. So we're talking about lengthen the spine, tuck the pelvis under. But it doesn't quite work. It doesn't quite work as an instruction. So I think we need to kind of reevaluate it a little bit. Saying that, there are certain poses where it does come into play, and it seems to be quite useful, such as the wide foot poses, angle poses, Trikonasana, and the whole group of poses that have that set up there. Yeah. Would you mind muting your mic, Sue?
Oh, sorry.
So that's the basis of it, right? Is that you get this interference with the spine. As soon as you tuck your toe under, you're going to get interference with this opening here. And with the mobility of the spine in general. I'll do it for you.
Yeah, you do.
And just watch out for that and try and become a bit more nuanced in your awareness of what happens between your pelvis, because the pelvis is really the pivotal. It's known as the fulcrum because it's the pivotal center of everything we do with yoga. Everything happens around the pelvis in terms of its action. Okay. So as we go through the practice today, I'll just point you towards, well, look at the pelvis, look at what's happening there. Do you need to make any adjustments in the pose? Okay. And we'll work like that. I'm not going to go into great detail on every posture. But just suffice to say that it doesn't really make sense, particularly for certain standing poses, to talk about attacking the pelvis under. Why have we done that historically? Someone had the bright idea that perhaps it was useful, but actually, if you look at what goes on in your body structure, you'll see that actually doesn't necessarily assist grounding in the standing poses, doesn't necessarily assist opening in the chest, doesn't necessarily assist in feeling longer in the pose either. So it's a slightly peculiar thing that's kind of crept in, but yoga is full of that kind of thing. So we're going to try and look at these things a little bit over time. Yeah. So anyway, we'll start off in the crocodile pose, and we're going to do a small selection of sitting poses, and then we're going to come up into our feet, and then we'll finish off with some lying on the back, such as the bridge pose, and then we'll finish maybe with an inversion and then some meditation. Okay. So if you'd like to come into the crocodile pose. And you notice straight away that you automatically come into a back bend. Okay, so you can rest your head down on your forearm or on your fists. Widen the feet, nice and wide, wider than the pelvis. Internal edge of the foot on the floor if you can, if not top of the foot on the floor. Resting the belly down, head supported by the arms. Forehead down. Making sure you've got a slight elevation in the chest. So beginning to just arrive into the practice. Broad base of awareness of the body on the ground. The breath connecting to the body. Giving ourselves the chance to arrive and letting go of the stories of the day, the narratives that we've been living throughout the day. Gradually becoming more aware of your immediate experience, which doesn't have to have a story about it. And it's really, we don't need to overthink what we're doing in the practice. We're overthinking, we're making things too complex. So it's just a habit to do that, right? So just come into the simplicity of the practice. In a way, when you know the basic structure of the poses, your body finds its own way. You just got to learn to trust that. So we'll come into the diaphragm smoothly, building up the breath. Over 10 breaths. Enhancing the breath, therefore enhancing the prana. We're gently energizing the system, oxygenating the system. We're sort of boosting up our system ready for the practice. So do that another 8 times, 8 cycles of diaphragmatic breath. Keeping it smooth and steady. Sense a connection to the awareness of the breath. From here, we're going to bring our feet together. This leave a bit of a space between the feet, but take the hands down by the side of the chest with the elbows into the sides of the body. And with your forehead tucked down initially, you're going to push yourself back onto coming into Balasana with the hands forwards, keeping the hands down on the ground and the arms long, and bring the forehead to the floor again, okay? And as you inhale, I'd like you to come forwards and lie down on the floor, keeping the elbows tucked in. On the next in-breath, we're going to raise one leg and the chest and head, looking forwards. Exhale, lower the leg down and the head down. Okay. On the next inhale, lifting the opposite leg, looking forwards. Exhale, floating the leg down, head down, okay? Pushing the hands into the floor again, coming back to Balasana. So be very aware here of the obvious overt movements of your pelvis, moving between anteversion, retroversion, okay? So you're already playing with forward bend and back bend here. Coming forwards, lowering the pelvis, but keeping the arms slightly bent, soften the elbows into Bhujangasana. Gazing forwards. Okay, so coming forwards. Coming forwards, looking forwards. It's like Harriet's lost her sound. Yep. Anyway, we'll come back, tucking the tailbone under. So this time we're going to tuck the tailbone under really, really firmly. I lost you there for a moment, Harriet. You sort of disappeared. You were doing... All right, so as you come back, tucking the tailbone under, this is what we call the Balasana stretch. So you lengthen out the base of the abdominal muscles and the base of the spine, tucking the tailbone under, and then come forwards again all the way down into the prone position, keeping the elbows into the side of the body. Head comes down. On the next in-breath, grounding one leg and lifting the other leg, looking forwards. Exhale, lowering the leg down, okay? Opposite leg, inhale, lifting the opposite leg, looking forwards. Simple movement, exhale, down, okay? Again, pressing back to Balasana. So this time as you come back again, you're going to tuck the tailbone under. So you are purposefully rolling the spine. You're creating the flexion of the spine here. Yeah. And then coming forwards, we're going to extend the spine back into Bhujangasana, drawing the pelvis down, keeping the elbows tucked in closely to the side of the body. Yeah. And then all the way down. Once again, coming up. This time we're going to come into downward facing dog. You might need to widen your base or broaden your base a little bit. Picking up the pelvis. So what do you do with the pelvis at this stage in your practice? What's habitually the way you work? So you might find you habitually roll the pelvis under with the idea of somehow lengthening the waist, okay? In order to release the heels down, sometimes we do that. We roll the pelvis under slightly. So see what you can do to soften the knees a bit and then lift the tailbone in the opposite direction. So we're going to deepen the lumbar curve. Not completely, just a little way. So make that a smooth movement, not a hard movement. So we're going to soften the abdominal area. Keep broadening the hands and spreading the weight through the hands and lengthening the neck. And then look forwards and shift the weight forwards onto all fours for a moment. Okay. Good. You might just want to shift your hands forward slightly so that your arms are more at an angle, leaning forwards rather than just straight under the shoulders, okay? And from here on the in-breath, you're going to tuck your tailbone under again. So a really clear flexion of the spine in the cow pose as you lift up the spinal column. And then we reverse Actually, that's the cat. This is the cow. And then we reverse the shape of the spine, reverse the shape of the pelvis. Yeah. So these are the movements we're going to be exploring in standing later on. Tucking the tailbone under, lifting the spine. With the breath on the inhale, releasing the belly down, lifting the tailbone. So be aware of how this interplay happens between the pelvis and the chest and the shoulders. Okay, how does it feel to lift the spine up and tuck the tailbone under? What do you notice? And then the opposite direction, you're releasing the abdominal muscles, which you have to do. Do that 4 more times, okay? Smooth movement, smooth transition. Okay, tucking your toes under, I'd like you to come back again to downward facing dog, lifting the pelvis right up, higher than before. So you can soften your knees and press up onto the balls of the feet and lift as high as you can. So you really get a sense of extending the spine, enhancing the lumbar curve, okay? So in other words, we're lifting the tailbone up and back rather than tucking it under. Keep awareness of the relationship there with the shoulders and the neck. So as you lift up, what effect does that have on the shoulders? Keep the neck lengthening through to the crown. And then release the legs so that the heels come down, trying to maintain the height of the pelvis as much as you can. And try to avoid tucking the tailbone under, even slightly. So just keep a sense of the tailbone drawing back and up as you lower the heels down. So resist the temptation to tuck the pelvis under. So all this might feel like a much stronger posture in the arms and shoulders. Just see if you can maintain that for another 6 breaths. Keep breathing through the pose so that we don't just become a muscular effort in the practice. Keeping the face soft, the root of the tongue soft, the gaze soft. So make sure we're countering the tendency to use more effort than is needed. Okay, looking forward, shift the weight forwards onto the knees. I'd like you to bring your feet forwards in front of you and your legs. Sit down. I'm going to bring the right leg in front of the left leg, like this. Drawing the buttocks out and back just a little bit. And closing the space between the knees a bit more if we can do that. It depends upon how much you're able to do that with your hips, so don't force them into the center. Or a sense of space in the hips. Okay. Taking the hands onto the hips, looking forwards onto the horizon. Soft gaze, soft root of the tongue. And say 4 times, we just, with the pelvis, we rock it backwards and we rock it forwards. And we're going to notice the direct relationship with the lumbar spine and the hip joints and the abdominal region. So just notice what happens quite clearly and obviously. It shouldn't take too much analysis to work out what's going on there. Relationship between the abdominal region and the hip joints and the pelvis as you rock back and forwards. What shows up? So this is an important observation from the point of view of standing poses and forward bends and backward bends. So then find something that seems like a neutral position where we're neither pressing the pelvis one way or the other. Maintain the curves in the spine. Look into the horizon, interlock the fingers nice and closely at the roots of the fingers. Extend your hands forwards and lift the thumb. So the thumb carries the inner edge of the arm upwards, lengthening the inner edge of the arm from the shoulder to the wrist. Keep your elbows inwards and keep your shoulder blades fairly rested down. Gaze into the horizon. Root of the tongue soft, gaze soft. You're going to tilt your pelvis just very slightly forwards so that you're enhancing the curve of the lumbar. You should notice that that gives you a little bit more capacity to lift up through the chest and the sides of the body. Yeah. And while you're doing that, if you just now reverse the shape of the spine, so if you tuck the tailbone under, so to speak, you notice you engage the abdominal muscles more. And you notice that you lose the capacity to lift and open the chest, right? So you start to shut down that area. So just do that again. Rock the pelvis forward so that the lumbar spine enhances. Okay. And then back once again to engage the abdominal muscles, because this is what happens. We end up toning the abdominal muscles when we tuck the tailbone under. Has a knock-on effect through the spine and the chest. And then come back to a neutral position. Slightly tilted forwards. So from here, we're going to keep on tipping the pelvis forwards. Okay, so extending out of the pelvis. Take the hands down onto the floor. Your next in breath, lifting the crown of the head up, looking forwards to the horizon as much as you can. Trying to keep the chest open and the front part of the body long as you now, and you come into this to the extent you want to, they come into a forward bend. So obviously we're going to tilt the pelvis forwards here. The spine comes into flexion. Release the head down, gaze to the floor. See if you can soften around the kidney area and the back of the body as you breathe down there. Soften the hips as well. Okay, and then with your hands, place your hands on the floor, press yourself back up. So you just use the hands to carry yourself back up again with the spine lengthening, sides of the body lengthening. Bring the hands all the way back behind us, as far as you can take the hands back in line with your shoulders, fingers facing forwards. And then we're going to reverse the shape of the pelvis. So we're now obviously tilting the pelvis forwards, not tucking the tailbone under. Lifting the heart center as if you had a thread attached to the heart center, drawing you up. So you're drawing up through the heart, the sternum, really opening the chest laterally. So this is a movement we want to encourage through tilting the pelvis forwards. Okay, this enhances the opening of the front of the body and the chest quite naturally. Yeah. If you want, you can now take your knees wider. You know this sequence, I think. Place your shins down and then lift up again. So you enhance even more the lift, this time through the groin as well. Breathing along the midline of the front of the body. So think of breathing down through the heart center, through to the navel, through to the pubic bone. And down we come. As we come down, we change the leg position over. Once again, as compact as possible, bringing the knees in towards each other. Just take your buttocks slightly back. And you're going to bring your hands around again, interlocking the fingers at the roots, perhaps changing the position of the fingers, one finger back or one finger forward. Lifting the thumbs, lengthening the inner arms. So we're already encouraging the pelvis to tilt forwards here so that we can access the lift through the trunk and opening through the sternum, through the ribs. The lower ribs are lifting away from the pelvis gently. And that's what we want to happen, okay? If we try to tuck the tailbone under slightly now, we notice that we lose the lumbar curve, don't we? We engage the abdominal muscles, they have to tone. And then what goes on in the upper body starts to close down, yeah? So tilt your pelvis forwards again so that we open up the chest. Lengthen through the waist, that's it. Okay, keep on tilting forwards now. Keep your pelvis rolling forwards primarily. Extending forwards. At some point, take your hands down on the floor. Keep your arms long. With your next in breath, just re-clarify the length in your waist. So the navel drawing away from the pubic bone, chest drawing up away from the navel. Looking forwards, and then you can exhale and come down. And then softening around the pelvis, softening around the lumbar and the kidney area. So actively use your breath to encourage that softening. Take your attention inwards. So become aware of the sensory experience of the pose. So the sensory experience in terms of the actual sensations in the different parts of the body, as well as whether that seems to be pleasant or unpleasant. Okay, lifting up. As we lift up, we broaden through the kidneys, broaden the chest, take the hands all the way back as far as you can. Lean back on the hands and lift the heart center up again. So the first thing is to activate this opening. And we enhance the rolling forwards of the pelvis, right? So we create more introversion. Take your knees as wide as you can, shins down. And if you want, you can lift up second phase. And release down. Okay. Very good. So we take a little vinyasa, just roll over the feet and take your feet back and return to downward facing dog. Keep a broad base, small finger aligning with the outside edge of the mat. Okay. Keeping the feet a little bit wider than your pelvis and pressing up. That's it. Then we're going to play again with this idea of tilting the pelvis, not under, but back. So by bending the knees, lifting the sacrum, and the coccyx lifts high. We try to lift the pelvis as high as we can. So we really strengthen the legs to lift. Try and keep the face and the neck soft The root of the tongue soft, even as you're activating the legs. Okay, and then see if you can lower the heels without dropping the pelvis under again. So release the heels down, but see if you can keep the tendency of the pelvis towards lifting. Okay, looking forwards. We're going to walk forwards towards the front of the mat, just taking small steps. No need to jump. I think I'm going to have to make an adjustment. Understanding ease. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to move solid on, just easier to get the camera. About that. Okay. Yep. Okay, so we're going to come to our classic Tadasana, mountain pose. So with the feet more or less together, maybe just a small gap, weight dropping down. Let's just follow the general instructions as we usually do this. Okay, so we're going to let the weight drop down just in front of the heel. Okay. And we're going to play with this idea of tucking the tailbone under, just seeing what effect that has, both on the gluteal muscles. So now we start to affect what happens in the pelvis when we do that. So the buttock muscles start to engage in a certain kind of way when we tuck the tailbone under. And it also affects the abdominal region, and it also affects the chest, as well as the rest of the spine. So everything gets influenced by that movement, that simple movement of tucking the tailbone under. But notice what else it does as well in terms of the weight on the feet. So where does the weight drop down to when you tuck the tailbone under? Is that desirable? So if you really make an effort to bring your tailbone under, you'll probably notice that the weight starts to shift more towards the back of the heels, right? So it pulls you to the back of your body. So now just relax that tendency. Let your spine take its normal, organic position. So don't tuck the tailbone under, okay? And let your spine swing back a little. And straight away, the weight distributes itself differently through the feet, right? You get the heels grounded and the rest of the feet as well. Not only that, but it also affects the way that we can work with the chest, because what we're doing when we tuck the tailbone under is restricting the movement of the chest, not allowing the opening of the chest. So we're reducing that. In most cases, okay, in most cases, what we're doing is we're restricting the movement of the chest. So we don't really want that, especially not if we're going to do sun salutations or anything that involves backward bending from standing. Okay? So as long as you're not feeling compression in your lumbar, allow your natural curves to be there in the lumbar spine. Don't think about dropping the tailbone under. Okay? So looking forward to the horizon, just rest your gaze somewhere in line with the space in front of you, level with the eyes. Let your curves be natural in the spine. A little bit of effort in the legs to engage the muscles is okay, but it should be fairly easy. On the next in-breath, we're going to float the arms out to the side on an in-breath, very easy, upward movement. Arms coming together. We're going to let the movement of the spine continue following its curves. So we're going to deepen into the back bend. And we're going to try and maintain that lift of the pelvis as we fold forwards on the exhale, bending the knees. So we keep the pelvis as long as we can in that position. Hands down, head down. We're going to step your left foot back, coming into lunge, from lunge. Step the opposite foot back. And, we come through the 8-point pose into Bhujangasana. And then we come into downward facing dog. Downward facing dog, we're going to step the left foot forwards. Come back again to lunge. From lunge. You can stay in high lunge if you don't want to lower the knee down, okay? Fine. Step forwards. Fold into your legs. Inhale, coming up. Letting the spinal curves follow through into back bend. Come back again to Tadasana. Okay, without making any attempt to then correct the spine by tucking the tailbone under. So just let your pelvis maintain its position according to the curve of your lumbar spine. Notice where the weight arrives on your feet. Again, keeping the sway of the lumbar spine back, open. Inhale, open the chest, swing up. Fold forwards, exhale, one smooth breath, one movement. As you come down, step your left foot back. Looking forward to the horizon. The 8-point pose. Bhujangasana. Exhaling into downward facing dog. Looking forwards, stepping the left foot forwards. Coming through, exhaling into the legs all the way through to standing. On an in-breath, one smooth movement. Exhale. So from there, we're going to step our left leg back, nice and wide, nice and long. Right foot pointing out. Classical setup for Trikonasana. Varying that to the extent you need to laterally. Okay, so you can make that broader if you need to. So here's where I would suggest we might actually want to keep the tailbone drawn down and under slightly, but you can experiment with this yourself, okay? There is a reason for it, but I quite like you just to explore the difference. So when you come into the pose, once we've moved into the pose, you can explore those two movements for the pelvis and see what happens in the hips and the legs for yourself, you know? So broaden your arms out parallel to the floor, grounding firmly through the feet, engage the legs. Looking out to the right side, you're going to extend. Notice what position your pelvis is in already as you come down. Hand down, arm up. Lifting away from the ground through the upper arm. So bring your head into what feels like your best alignment for your neck and your shoulders. And then just experiment with allowing the pelvis to tilt back a little bit and then bringing it under and see what feels more appropriate for the pose. So when we tilt the pelvis back, then we throw the body back as well. Notice what effect that has on the back of the leg and the hip. And then tuck your tailbone down a bit, see what happens there. Let's experiment, yeah? Keep connected to the breath. Okay, softening your front knee. So we're going to move straight into the other side without much hesitation. Okay, inhale, up you come. Straightening the front of the leg, turning your right foot in, left foot out, looking to the left side, gazing to the horizon, grounding the feet, extend out to the left side. Again, taking the hand down. Swinging the arm up and then using the upper arm to help you draw the energy upwards. Okay, so you're drawing up from the upper body, grounding the legs. So don't expect us to find the same thing on each side, but experiment with these movements again. Pelvis drawing back, deepening the lumbar curve. Pelvis tucking under more. So it's a complex movement for the pelvis in Trikonasana. It's not the same as a symmetrical pose. Yeah? Just get a feel of that through the pelvis, relationship to the pelvis and the chest. Okay, soften the front knee, use the upper arm and the energy through the upper arm to draw you up on the in-breath. One smooth movement, straighten the front leg, turn your left foot in and right foot down. We'll step forwards to Tadasana. Again, just relaxing the curves of the spine. Let the pelvis find its own place. Take another in-breath and sweep the arms up above the head. Float the arms up, exhale, float forwards. Hands down. We're going to walk the feet back, coming straight into downward facing dog this time. And then turning your left foot in, bring your right foot forwards. Okay, so we're facing the short edge of the mat. Okay, short edge of the mat. Come up from there, adjust your stance if you need to in terms of the breadth or the length as you need to. We want the pelvis facing forwards, and as much as possible, we've got the front part of the pelvis in line. Okay. So if you were to give the instruction to yourself now to tuck the tailbone under, it would seem almost absurd, wouldn't it? Contradictory, because the positioning of the leg draws the pelvis into anteroversion quite naturally. So we're using the curves of the spine here in the way that they want to be used and need to be used. We're more in a back bend position to start with, until we come into a forward bend. Okay. So from here, we're going to float the arms up, palms looking at each other, facing in. Inhale. Exhale, let the arms just float down again. Just be attentive to what's going on in the pelvis and the chest as you do this. Inhale, float the arms up. Keep the legs fairly firm, feet grounded. Exhale, arms floating down. Next time, as we float the arms up, we're going to bend the front knee. So we lower the pelvis down, sweep up, one smooth movement, looking straight ahead to the horizon. Soft gaze, keep the root of the tongue soft. Be aware of the hip joint at the back, the pelvis. If you need to turn the thigh bone in more, turn the thigh bone in more. See what effect that has on the lumbar spine. Yeah? So you should feel here that you've got quite a strong curve in the lumbar, but not compression. Hopefully not compression, okay? Or not too much compression. So keep an emphasis on lifting up and opening the chest. Broaden the base of the hands as well. Okay, you're going to straighten the front leg. Keep the arms lifted if you can. If not, just rest them down. You're going to turn to the other side. Opposite direction. Then broad across the pelvis, balanced, so that both parts of the pelvis are looking forwards equally. Sweep the arms up on an in-breath, palms facing in. And float the arms down again. We'll do this a couple of times, okay? Palms down, floating in. Palms looking in, floating up, inhale. We're aware of the pelvis, we're aware of the hip, especially the spine. Exhale. This time as we lift the arms, we're going to bend the front knee. Come into the pose more classically, lowering the pelvis as much as you can. If you feel you're too broad in the base, just adjust yourself. Rounding and lengthening. Broadening the hands, encouraging a sense of lengthening through the trunk. Okay, straighten the leg, bring the arms in. We're going to turn back again all the way to the other side of the mat and step forwards. Come back to Tadasana a moment. Really make an effort to just relax the curves of the spine. Let the pelvis find its place. Be aware of the feet, how the weight distributes itself over the feet. Is it feeling different? Okay, on the in-breath, floating the hands up again, palms facing in, arching back, using the back bend capacity, spine exhaling, keep the spine extending as you come forwards as much as you can. Hands down, step your feet back, come into downward facing dog. Come right into downward facing dog again. And then I'd like you to turn your left heel in and step your right foot forwards again. Not such a long base this time, and slightly wider so that you've got the right foot drawn out to the edge of the mat just a bit more. Just give ourselves a bit more space in the pelvis. So when you shorten the base and widen it, you notice there's not so much emphasis on the lumbar. Okay. So obviously the wider you go and the narrower you go, the more intense it ends up being for the spine. The more experience, that's not an issue at all. Just watch out for too much compression in the lumbar. Okay. So again, we've got this backward tilt of the pelvis that's quite normal and natural. If we try to adjust that by bringing the pelvis under, we're going to falsify the whole dynamic of the pelvis in the spine. It's not the thing we want to do in this position. Okay. Also pulls a lot on the anterior ligaments of the hip by doing that. So it's normal to let the spine draw back, or the pelvis draw back, not tuck the pelvis under. Okay. So we're going to bring the arms forwards and around. You can take the hands into reverse namaste if you like, or you can just take the hands onto the elbows. Walk your hands in as much as you can, so you really broaden the chest laterally. Look into the horizon, rounding the feet. On the next out breath, we're going to bring the body forwards. Nice, smooth movement. Not overthinking what we're doing here, so just feel the body in its movements. Make adjustments as you need to make adjustments. Bringing the body parallel. If you want to practice a bit more deeply, you bring this, keep thinking about lengthening the spine and lowering. So watch the feedback your body's giving you. Make the adjustments as you need to make the adjustments, okay? Keep the energy moving through the legs, keep the breath moving through the pose. Soft gaze, soft root of the tongue. And when you've practiced enough on that side, please just come up and practice on the other side, okay? So make a transition, turn around. Carry on. Okay, up you come on the in-breath, turn all the way around to the other side of the mat. We'll go for one more vinyasa. down into downward facing dog. One last time. So inhale, extend up, exhale, fold forwards. Walk back. So we're doing a half downward facing, we're doing a half sun salutation. Right, and then looking forward, stepping forwards, walking forwards. Exhale, fully fold into the legs. Inhale, come up with a spine that's long, reaching back. And then we're going to take the base for Trikonasana. Not Trikonasana, tree pose, I'm going to say. So taking your weight to the left, bring up your right foot. So we can just explore that dynamic here in a balancing pose to see what difference it makes to the balance on the spine and the chest. Okay, so it's the same principle that's taking place as in Tadasana, but one leg at a time. So it's quite often we want to throw the pelvis back, otherwise we don't want to tuck the pelvis under necessarily, because it throws us into a funny sort of balance. We're taking our weight all the way back onto the heel and off the front of the foot, yeah? Just allow your spine and your pelvis to maintain its organic curves there. The organic position your pelvis wants to take, right? And then build the pose up from that basis. Keep a clear awareness of the ground beneath you and the foot. Legs active. Growing up with the hands, reaching up. Gaze into the horizon, keeping the root of the tongue and the eyes soft in the distance. Awareness to the breath. And releasing the arms down. We can gracefully change to the other side. Straight in to the other side without hesitation. Straight up with the leg. Growing up into the pose. Good. Okay, I'm going to come down on all fours for a moment into Virasana. Placing the hands on the hips. And come up onto the knees. Now we're going to tilt the pelvis backwards so that we enhance the lumbar curve. Pressing down through the shins, we're going to lean back slightly. And then come down again. This time coming up, we're going to tuck the pelvis under. Noticing the effect that has on the buttocks. Yeah? Just do that again. So you come down. As you come up, let your pelvis draw back so you enhance the lumbar. Notice how your buttocks pretty much relax there, and the abdominal region also relaxes. And down. And then just do that again, just so it's clear, your own experience. As you come up, you tuck your tailbone under. But notice how it does engage the fronts of the legs, okay? So this is a sort of improvised version of Utkatasana, or chair pose, where we do actually want the emphasis to be more through the front of the body and the legs. So if we let the tailbone draw back here, if you do that now, straight away you feel the fronts of the legs disengage, more or less, yeah? So it's not in terms of it being a right or a wrong from the point of view of the spine and the pelvis, it's more the action and the energy of the legs and how they involve themselves in the pose and the buttocks. So you can choose, in a way, how you want to emphasize this. So we really come up into the Utkatasana position, the arms above, and let the pelvis draw back. So it's quite eventually strong on the lumbar, right? But it allows us certain mobility in the chest. So if you do the other way, tucking your tailbone under, you lose the action of the upper body. You engage the legs, but it doesn't feel right in the pelvis somehow, in this position anyway. Okay, release back, come down. So we're just going to take that into Utkatasana, the last standing pose we're going to do today. Come back again to standing. Keep a bit of space between the feet, okay, all the way to standing. And join the palms together in Namaste before the heart center. And so we're going to release the knees and draw down. We're going to get the classical entry to tucking the tailbone under and then trying to extend the arms up. So the issue with this is that one thing doesn't lend itself to the other. So it does activate the legs, but it doesn't lend itself to opening the chest and the back. So you let the tailbone swing back. Now you can emphasize much lifting, more lifting, no bigger than the chest, but you disengage the legs. Okay, exhaling, fold forwards. Take your hands, if you can, underneath your feet. If you can't, doesn't matter, just take your fingers onto the floor. So we can really just clarify again the length of your trunk, drawing the navel away from the pubic bone, heart center away from the navel, and really let go into the legs as you fold forwards, exhaling. Whether the legs straight or bent, it doesn't really matter. Releasing the crown of the head all the way towards the floor. Okay, I'd like you to come down into child pose for a moment. So just drop down. Any variation you want to do. If you'd like to press yourself up and roll onto your back, come into semi-supine position. So we're going to do a little bit of a closing sequence. We won't go into doing an inversion today. So we're going to finish off with bridge with Matsyasana, or the fish pose, which we normally do after an inversion. And then some lying simple twists. Okay. So taking your hands down onto the floor, palms down, lengthways into the side, by the side of the body, broaden your feet and take your heels just a little bit wider than your pelvis. Okay. And we're going to do this in two ways, just to experiment again with the pelvis. So first of all, we're going to tuck the tailbone under. So this is a typical version of coming into the pose that we do. We tuck the tailbone under, lift the pelvis, carry the spine through all the way to the tops of the shoulders. Yeah. And then we release down from the tops of the shoulders through the spine. Pelvis is the last thing to come down. We'll do that a couple of times. Lifting the tailbone, aware of the different segments of the spine, how they're interacting with the pelvis here. And releasing down from the top of the spine all the way again. Okay. Now we're going to lift up, keeping the tailbone tucked back more, not under. And we're going to lift up towards the shoulders. And then we're going to release down through the spine all the way down to the lumbar. Okay, do that again. This time letting the tailbone just draw back. So we've got the lumbar spine enhanced and it's curved, lifting up. Now see if once you're up there, you can tuck your elbows under a bit more, just to really enhance the opening in the front of the body and laterally through the chest, okay? So tailbone is drawing down and the curve of the lumbar is deepening as you press through the feet and lift up. So that's obviously a movement that enhances the opening of the chest and the front of the body. Yeah, so the curves of the spine there are doing what they want to do. If you were to lift the tailbone up now, and try and tuck your pelvis under, it just feels very strange, doesn't it? It feels very counterintuitive. You're hardening around the body instead of softening around the body. Release back again, one last time. This time interlocking the fingers under the body. So you come into the classical form of Vipalam. Pressing through the feet and lifting as high as you can. You're going to hold that for 8 breaths. If you get tired sooner, then obviously just come down. Yeah. And releasing down. Once you're down on the floor, extend out your legs in front of you, one after the other. And then you can either catch hold of the buttocks with the palms of the hands or keep the hands pressed down on the floor by the side of the body, thumbs under the buttocks. It's up to you. And you're going to lift the spine again, coming into an obvious flexion of the spine. Head comes back. Looking backwards with a soft gaze, soft tongue. Okay, releasing down back into semi-supine again. And just letting your arms float up at the height of your shoulders with the palms up. Taking a pause. And we'll bring the feet together and the knees together and lift the feet off of the floor. And we'll let the legs rather, fall over towards the right side, okay? So a nice soft version of the reclining twist. And let go. Once you're into the pose, just let go through the body. Don't try to control the legs or control the pelvis. Keep the face as soft as you can. Just remind yourself that actually a part of the practice is always softening. Internally softening through the body. And when you feel like you've let go to some extent, spend another minute just seeing if you can let go a bit more through the pose. Okay, and then come over to the other side smoothly. Both legs together. Once you've arrived, again, let go. When you feel like you've let go to some extent, see if you can let go a bit more. So don't worry about the posture looking correct and aligned or not. Just let go of the idea of the practice, even. Let go of the breath. For the next couple of minutes, I'd like you to do any posture that you'd like to do. And then we're going to do a very, very short period of sitting with me. Of course, you can carry on sitting as long as you want to. And I'll just be here with you for 5 minutes, okay? Okay, well, sit if you want to sit, or you can lie down if you want to lie down. It's up to you. So I'm just going to be with you very briefly now because it's almost past. I've got to be somewhere else at past. So the first point of attention is the body and the effects of the practice, the experience. And then a sense of the spaciousness in the body, however that manifests. There's a sense of ease, a sense of lightness, sort of reduction in tension. And just see if you can encourage yourself in a kindly way, not a forceful way, to just rest within. So keep the attention within the direct experience of your breathing, perhaps, or the sensations of the body, rather, from breathing. And we might include in that awareness our experience as it's unfolding, as it's moving through us. Trains of thought that are subtle or not so subtle. Just letting them go. Just let the energy of the mind pass by without getting involved in whatever concepts are coming forwards. You can maintain for the next 10 minutes or so just a quality of rest, but resting within awareness.